No one notices the dull growling and chain rattling behind us. But, like upset hens, old French women run across the road, through the small streets in the village, and disappear into the houses. "For hell's sake, there are tanks on the road over there," I hiss to my friends, and see a small tank, which I recognize as an American Sherman tank, rolling in the direction of Soissons, followed closely by larger tanks. "They are ours," the captain laughs, joining us. Before I can answer, a shattering cannon shell tears all illusions to shreds as it slams into the front vehicle on the edge of the village. "Take cover," the captain orders. We run right through the park, climb over a 6-foot-high brick wall, and try to pull half of the unit behind us toward a nearby wooded hill where we can reassemble. In the meantime, I take a map out of my bag and find that to the right of the hill, about 2.5 miles distant, is a secondary road that parallels the main road we were following in our retreat. A sergeant volunteers to see if the Americans are on that road as well. If it is already occupied by the Americans, the only possibility is to break through during the night. Altogether, we number 42 men, 1 machine gun, 1 automatic pistol, and 12 rifles. We sit around smoking and listen to the wild noise of fighting in the town until the sergeant returns and reports that the road is occupied by the enemy. A glimmer of hope is extinguished. We are surrounded. We push to the east edge of the woods, from which we have a clear view into several parts of the burning town. The fighting noise from Soissons diminishes. Dusk spreads over the woods and valley floor. A night fog arises over the meadows and fields that separate us from the city, where German soldiers still battle against the enemy for the right of occupation. The captain and the lieutenant come crouching to us. "Do you have a plan to get us out of this dead end?" the captain asks, remaining completely calm. "I suggest this, Captain. After dark, we move toward the burning house to the far right. The meadows and fields in front of us can be crossed quite quickly. Then we can pass around the city as much as the terrain will allow. It is senseless to try to cross the Aisne over a bridge, since they have undoubtedly all been secured. We must cross the river by way of the open land and cannot use any roads. After that, we can find our way without much trouble." I express my point of view. "I think we will be able to do it," the captain indicates. "Pass the word to get ready," he orders the sergeant sitting next to him. The 3 of us get up and pass among the men to make it clear that only weapons and ammunition can be carried, and under no circumstances are they to make any noise. A short time later, one of the sergeants takes the machine gun, and the 3 of us wait for the signal from the captain to move out. Silently, we slide down the slope, and after half an hour reach the open meadow that stretches out before us, now covered with ground fog. Keeping only the burning city with the house to the right in view, we move through the sleeping valley floor. The rest of our comrades follow like shadows. We stumble upon a field road, which heads in the general direction we have set. Following it, we are only about a mile from the edge of the city. The slightest strange noise from the shortest distance seems to ring in our attentive ears. Without a word, we lie on the right side of the way, in a potato field. The few noises behind us indicate that the rest of the group has understood. Raising my head over the potato plants, I look backward and see only the dusty, lonely road through the field. "We must stay to the right," I whisper to Hocker lying close to me, and continue in a southerly direction and single file. He passes the suggestion on to Briller. Straining to hear, we wait for the message to be passed on. Nothing stirs, neither in front nor behind us. In the process of getting up, I clearly hear the voice of an American. "Shall I spray him with the machine gun?" the sergeant asks Briller. "That won't do us any good," I hiss back, "but just alarm the whole mob. Tell the sergeant," I whisper to Hocker, "that under no circumstances is he to open fire without an order." It is exactly 12:10 a.m. and I have a terrible thirst. Forcefully I suppress a sneeze. I breathe deeply through my mouth and press the air out of my lungs through my nose to get the dust from some flour out of my nostrils. For the moment, I am successful. Intensively, my thoughts focus on the possible situation for the enemy. I conclude that during the late evening hours, the infantry, with some tanks, had cleared the Germans out of the town, and that the tanks had moved on ahead. With the coming of night, the invaders will establish a circular defense around Soissons and move under cover. In this way, all the roads and streets leading to the city will be sealed off by the opponent, and we are lying right next to an American machine gun nest. There is no choice but to try and go around the city in a wide circle. I whisper my deliberations to Hocker, and he passes them on to Brilla. Like a snake, Brilla crawls towards me. Man, I have landed in an ant pile. The beasts have worked me over so much that my skin burns like I'm frying in hell, he laments slowly into my ear. That won't hurt you any, old fellow. You won't get to heaven anyway. In the meantime, the ant's venom will save you from rheumatism here on earth. I console him and raise my head above the potato plants. Can you see anything? He tugs at my arm. Nothing of any importance, I respond and lay myself flat on the earth. I have come to basically the same conclusion as you, but I do not like the direction. We know that the Americans have penetrated further south of Paris than to the north. Besides, the Tommies are holding back quite a distance in the north. That is clear to me, I answer back, but you forget that we did not have any other choice since our quarters were south of the main road. Consequently, we must try it in this direction. Good, he agrees. We can't lie here forever. Let's get going. Carefully, we get up and prowl parallel to the city edge across the fields. Glancing to the right, I recognize the individual dark shadows that rise from the potato field, and follow in single file until a few yards to the right a scuffling noise is heard when two rifles collide. We throw ourselves to the earth at once. Not 20 yards ahead of us, we hear the excited voices of Americans and see a white flame rise in the sky. Almost simultaneously, a machine gun barks its fire along the field road. Devoid of any common sense, the comrades break out like a herd of sheep, retreating backward out of the potato field and seeking security in a frantic flight. Hugging the earth, we wait until the Americans have calmed down. With our pistols ready to fire, we listen intently for any approach of our adversaries. The hands of my illuminated wristwatch move steadily, and within half an hour, nothing has occurred. Who is still here? I nudge Hocker next to me, who passes the question on to Brilla. A barely noticeable rustle, which disappears in a few seconds, indicates that Brilla is going backward to check on the number of comrades still with us. I believe they all took off, Hocker mumbles to himself. Then we are no longer responsible for them and can try to get through alone, I whisper to him and look over the top of the potato plants. After 15 minutes, Brilla snakes back to us. Not one is still here, he breathes angrily. So we were not wrong in our judgment of this miserable herd, Hocker hisses through his teeth. After a short war council, we conclude that we will try it alone and keep to our intended direction. We crawl one after another and after 20 minutes reach the edge of the potato field. Keeping to the left, we make our way across a meadow until a swamp with reeds forces us to halt. Without any hurry, we look for a suitable place to overcome this obstacle. We succeed after a few minutes, but not without severely taxing the ability of my indestructible comrades to keep from laughing, when a stupid accident causes my right boot to slide on a slippery spot, and I end up in the water. Dripping wet, I reach the opposite bank, and with the help of my comrade, pull off my boots to rid them of the stinking water. Under the amused grins of these malicious fellows, I wring out my socks and slip my boots back on. Just wait, you scoundrels! I take the wind out of their sails. Someone has prepared a surprise for you somewhere. Without delaying any longer than necessary, we continue further, and after an hour come to a secondary road on which there is considerable traffic by American supply trucks. Pressed tightly against the embankment, we wait for a break in the traffic, and then, with a quick jump, reach the south side of the road. Continuing in a southerly direction, we steer toward a burning building far to the right. Lulled by the hope that we will be able to skirt the city without being noticed, I suddenly hear clearly the loading of a weapon. Once again, we kiss France's hotly contested earth, holding to it tightly. Dark clouds have appeared in the heavens. Only a few individual stars can be seen in the firmament, keeping alive in us the belief in a good outcome. Time presses. Before it gets light, we must find a safe shelter. It is 2:20 a.m. as we retreat toward the west to make another circle in our third attempt to get through. At exactly 3 a.m., as we are attempting to cross the railroad tracks running north and south to Soissons, two machine guns open fire several yards from us, to our complete surprise, and force us to take cover under the howling buzz that is tearing up the meadow. Amazed and sure that we had not made any noise, we look backward and notice a tree about 100 yards in the distance, on which the Americans must have seen our silhouettes. A short turn from Brilla's lips is enough for us to execute a 180-degree turn on our bellies, and, like serpents being pursued, slither back in a westerly direction. A new burst of adrenaline gives us a renewed shot of energy to our waning strength. We assemble behind the tree, which was the reason for the Americans' fire. Just now, when we have no possibility of finding any secure cover, it begins to rain. After a short discussion, we get up and follow each other further to the west. Not until we are sure that we are out of range of the American machine guns do we take cover in the underbrush. This time the devil has his dirty fingers in the game. I open our conversation. That's the way it looks, Hocker agrees, pulling a comb out of his field blouse to fix his hair. Now it is absolutely necessary that we find shelter for the day. It will be light in an hour, Brilla growls, lying on his back. Unfortunately, there is not a solitary barn or shed in this damn area, Hocker answers sullenly. In every situation the German soldier has come out all right, I throw out, and we will find a place to camp. The best thing would be to return back to that woman. Brilla suppresses a laugh. Now I would not say no to her if afterward she would let me sleep alone in her bed. That is not such a bad idea. Hocker reaches for this thought spoken in jest. Does that mean that we should go back that far? I object. Be calm and listen, Brilla says in a low tone. It is obvious that we will not get anywhere trying to go south. I can imagine that the road to the city, the main road from the north, is the open left flank as the Americans have pushed into Soissons. If that is the case, then in the coming night we just need to find an opening to cross the road and head in the direction of Laon to connect up with the German troops. Not to detract from your idea, Brilla, but what it means is to bet everything on one card and to renounce the time we have already wasted foolishly. I mix in with my warning. Then tell us what you think we should do, Helmut, Brilla says. We cannot lose any more time. You have seen for yourselves what the Americans have rolling across the roads. It doesn't look to me like it's just a matter of the situation around Soissons. They are well informed about our troop movements. They wouldn't shy away from pushing into an empty sector to secure it. We should consider whether or not we should get going and try our luck to the south, or just find shelter here in this vicinity and wait for the coming night, I suggest. So, Brilla seizes the initiative. Let's look at our alternatives. Since it is now light, a march to the south is out of the question. That only leaves this piece of woods for our shelter, since with this weather we cannot camp in the open meadowlands. If there is still fighting in the city, then my viewpoint is correct, and we should try to get through to Laon. If it is quiet, then we are just as close to the northern road as the southern. As I said before, I think the northern route is better. Does anyone have a better idea? He asks, pulling in his legs to stand up. No, Hocker and I answer simultaneously and get to our feet. As quickly as the terrain allows, we make our way to the heights of the wooded hills, straight to the northwest. After an hour, we reach the southern side of the road. A convoy of trucks moves through, forcing us to take cover. Snuggled close to each other, we stretch out in the low grass and stare at the passing vehicles loaded with American infantry soldiers. It is apparently no fun for the Americans either to be driven so early in the morning in this weather toward the German weapons. Quietly, they sit on the benches of the trucks as though they were animals being driven to the slaughterhouse. They would probably rather be with their wives, lying in a warm nest instead of picking chestnuts out of the fire for the old Roosevelt, Hocker says out loud with sad eyes as the last truck rolls past. That is what is the most shitty in this world. I agree with him. Otherwise, you did not perceive anything special about this funeral parade? Brilla notes in the early morning. What was there that was so special to be seen? I ask curiously. It was infantry, he says calmly. That's right, Brilla, I admit. and immediately it registers in my consciousness what he means. Now, I nearly believe that you were right about our wedge. Then it appears that to this hour at least, they have not brought any artillery forward. I laugh with admiration at his sharp vision. That's nice of you, he continues to mock me. I did not expect that you would tune in so soon. I thought you only used your hot head to dry your hat. Ah, the old Brilla still lives, then nothing can go wrong for us today. Hocker closes the circuit of our comradeship. Let's go, you old washwomen. Brilla laughs and gets ready to start. Like the wind, we sweep across the road and roll down into the grass. Securing all sides, we move as quickly as possible in a northwesterly direction toward the hilly section of woods from which, last night, we made the first attempt to break through with the miserable remainder of the battalion. In the meantime, it is now 5:15 a.m. Despite the time of day, thanks to the light rain and the thin early fog over the meadows and farmland, it is possible for us to continue our journey. But still, we slowly become suspicious, because while there is the loud noise of motors to the right and left of us, to this hour not one shot has sounded in Soissons. In an area of thin scrubs and old dried-up fruit trees, about 500 yards from the ascending forest, we lie down for a council. Finally, daylight allows us to light a cigarette without danger. Given entirely to the anticipated pleasure, we open the packages with nervous fingers and shove the sticks filled with golden yellow tobacco into our mouths. Light? Brilla asks in forced calmness. Light? I ask Hocker, and clap with both hands on my pockets, without hearing the familiar rattle of matches. In shock, we look at each other. Is it possible that we have hauled 240 cigarettes around with us, and no one has a match? That is the worst that has happened to us yet, Brilla expresses, completely dejected. We put the cigarettes back into our pockets. Suddenly, and completely unexpectedly, from behind the woods, the crack of artillery fire from 4 American batteries is heard, and seconds later, the heavy projectiles howl above us through the rain clouds. Like steel springs from which the pressure is suddenly released, we pop to our feet and follow the flight of the shells, recognizable by their roar. Seconds later, 4 mushrooms of smoke rise toward the sky in the southeastern part of the city. That makes me sick, Brilla shakes his head. We could be there right now if we had listened to you, Helmut. There are still some Germans at work, and we could have helped them. Nonsense, Robert. When they send the next salvo into the northeast section, then you will be right again. We are not going to get any farther right now. I am in favour of getting a couple of sheaves of oats and finally going to sleep for a while. I comfort Brilla, laying my hand on his shoulder. Why should we bring those things over here? Hocker mumbles to himself. It would be better to get under them where they are. The ground is certainly dry. He is right, Brilla indicates. They could see us carrying the bundles. Of course, I agree, but each one of us would have to nestle alone in one of the pyramids, and we cannot exchange any thoughts. Let's get some sleep first, Brilla decides. We can tell each other our dreams later on. We make our way toward the field and disappear under the stacked oat sheaves, where I immediately fall asleep sitting up. It is 11:25 a.m. The rain has let up. Torn shreds of clouds hang in the sky, through which the timid rays of the sun dare to come out from time to time. On the stalks of my tiny straw hut, silver streaks of water drops run down and disappear into the earth. Little bugs are busy at my feet on the fertile field. A light vapour rises 2 feet above the earth. Life will go on, even when I am stiff and rigid under the earth. A father cannot keep his son back from war anymore, even though he breaks his heart over why he has raised him, so that when he becomes grown he must be destroyed. A young wife will cry for her mate and press tenderly to her the child who will never see its father again. No news will reach the homeland about the manner or place of my destruction. Like a dog, I will be thrown into a hole and covered by hate-filled strangers who only want to save themselves from the stink and danger of infection from the corpse. It will not be otherwise. But the will to live rises powerfully in me. Determined, I reach my hand into the holster and bring the cold, hard steel in front of my eyes. Whoever is seeking your life, I whisper to myself, has forfeited his own. My hot blood rages in my veins and drives me to my feet. Like the shells of larvae awakened to life, the oat sheaves fall apart. Committed to act, I call to my friends to depart and go about securing all sides of the hollow. "What is going on?" both call, coming out of the oat field into the hollow. "We have finally got to do something, friends, if we don't want to be cornered by the dogs," I respond, and keep my eyes on them. "I have been observing the terrain around us," says Brilla, loaded with new energy, "and I don't think we will stumble into a trap if we can cross the 500 yards and get into the woods." "Then let's get going immediately." My impatience pushes to my lips. "What happened to you, Helmut?" asks Hocker, mistrustful. "I want to have a decision, Willie," I respond coldly. "Don't lose your nerve. One should not do anything rashly," he warns, raising his index finger. 19 hours have passed since the Americans caught up with us. You cannot talk about acting in haste. Rather, the opposite is more the case, I insist. "Don't prattle unnecessarily and stick close to my heels," Brilla demands, and walks calmly out of the hollow. Obviously nervous, Hocker chews on a grass stalk as he pulls his pistol out of the holster and follows Brilla. Securing the rear, I follow last. Exactly at 2 p.m, we are sitting on the same tree trunk that Hocker collapsed onto to catch his breath yesterday at 6 p.m. Now, unmerciful hunger and thirst register. We have not had anything to eat or drink for 22 hours. Dull, tired, hungry, thirsty, and with soaking clothes on our bodies, the three of us sit, forsaken by God and the world, in a French forest from whose trees water drips down our necks with the slightest breeze. Rage, slowly but surely, rises in us. In addition, we are surrounded by the enemy, but we still struggle to keep the vague hope that for well-trained soldiers it will not be too difficult to get out of this encirclement. We forget that now, in 1944, after more than 4 years of war, we have become weaker while the others have grown stronger. "If we had only left Soissons with the SS," Hocker opens the round. "If we had only gone to a respectable unit in Paris," Brilla joins in. "If this shitty war had only stayed with the devil," I add my 2 cents worth. Restlessly, I get up and wander in a circle around my 2 companions, whereby I stumble upon the remains of the equipment and supplies left by the men from our battalion. Out of sheer boredom, I turn over with my feet the helmets, belts, and cartridge pouches until I come to a bread sack, which I pick up and examine curiously. Well, well. I groan and pull a piece of Swiss cheese out of the bag. Sauntering toward my friends, I see their expectant faces looking at me. Then I feel something crawling on my hand holding the cheese, and I quickly look to see what it is. Angrily, I shake my hand vigorously without letting go of the cheese, and 20 ants that were clinging to it fall to the ground. The last one I brush off with a branch torn from a tree, then I hurry proudly to my companions. "So," I hold the cheese in front of their hungry eyes, "isn't that something?" "It weighs at least 300 grams with the holes." Hocker laughs and reaches for the cheese, just as a red-brown ant crawls out of one of the holes. "Do these beasts also eat cheese?" Brilla asks, observing the animal. "No," Hocker jokes in response. "They don't eat it. We will." Finally, a laugh comes back to our serious faces, as Hocker cuts the cheese into 3 pieces. "It will give the stomach something to do," Brilla indicates, and, struggling with the entire mass, shoves it into his mouth all at once. With a mighty effort, he swallows the entire gluey clod as his eyes bulge out like those of a frog. "Dirt grub," he spits out as his tongue makes a half circle between his cheeks, lips, and teeth, while we struggle to suppress our laughter. "Don't laugh, you dirty sacks," he growls angrily. "Come on, old man," I nudge him. "What will the madam do when we appear? Perhaps she has something that you can wash your mouth with." "You don't want to go down to the village, do you?" He jumps up with a jolt. Hocker looks at me, upset. "That is exactly what I want to do, at least to the edge of the village so that we can finally see what is going on there," I answer, determined. "Or don't you want to go over the road toward Laon?" I follow up. "Of course I want to do that, but it is still daylight," Brilla counters. "Then let's at least go far enough so that we can see the village and the vehicles," I demand dauntlessly. Without further dispute, we go into the underbrush so we can slip down the slope. Just as we reach a point where we can see the church and some of the roofs of the village, the bells in the village begin to clang. Loud shouts in the village streets are sure proof that Soissons is free of Germans. Liberté pour Français! Bellow a pair of children's voices as the bells become silent. This time we are really in deep, Hocker mumbles angrily. Tonight we will look up the Madame, Brilla says gruffly. We will learn from her where the Americans are, he adds. She will turn us in, I warn. We lie in the thick underbrush and await nightfall. Calmly and attentive to everything, we glide quietly down the rest of the hill and a little later stand in complete darkness before a high park wall that we follow to the left until it makes a right turn into the village. Carefully, we work our way to the first houses and discover double guards with long fixed bayonets on the village streets. They are French, I murmur to my comrades. Shall we try it further to the west or east? Brilla asks. Eastward, comes from our mouths at the same time. Then about face, Brilla whispers, and I am now in the lead. Quickly we make our way over the small meadow that is nestled between the village and the wood, and after 30 minutes reach the eastern limits of the village. We recognise the frame of our burned-out ammunition truck, but even there, further eastward, Frenchmen stand smoking together with weapons on their shoulders. The French are in front and behind us. Inch by inch we make our way slowly through the meadow, then pass a guard standing on the road. I do not have the slightest fear of the French, but the thought of being in this situation with the Russians seizes me with terror. Brilla approaches me from behind. Just keep going, Robert. I will watch out for the Frenchman, I say softly in his ear. It is 1:35 a.m. when we stand up north of the railroad track and joyfully stride out in a northeast direction toward Léon, which lies about 25 miles in the distance. For an hour and a half, we march unmolested across the fields, keeping Soissons to our right, so that we can cross the railroad line headed north. We later observe human shadows on the horizon above the railroad grade. They move here and there in typical American fashion. Robbed of all hope, we let ourselves fall exhausted into the grass and stare into the heavens, from which comes no advice or means of escape. Further northward, I say without any power in my voice. It is certainly hopeless, my companions answer. Then we must try and get some civilian clothes and see if we can go on during the day, I answer. Where will you get civilian clothes? They ask. What about the Madame, Brilla? I nudge him. She just wants a man in bed and not to help anyone who is trying to flee, he snaps, depressed. Then I will try it, I say, and sit upright. If one goes, we all go, they both respond. Okay, then let's go back again to the village, I say, filled with new courage, and stand up quickly. Silently we retrace our steps. Exhausted, we stop close to one of the houses standing along the street near the main road of traffic. We fall into a thin clump of bushes and immediately fall asleep. A bright day greets us as we awake. The sun burns hot in the sky. Looking toward the street, we are amazed at the convoys of Americans rolling eastward uninterrupted. How are we going to get across this road? Hocker flusters in shock. They won't be travelling forever, Brilla responds confidently. It is already 9 o'clock, I indicate with a laugh. Time doesn't matter anymore, Hocker reacts laconically. Brooding, we lie again on our backs and blink into the sun. Around 10 o'clock, the traffic on the road suddenly stops. Not one human being is to be seen in the entire area. Let's go, men. Brilla forces a grin and stands up. Get ready to die, Hocker indicates. Boldly, we step into the road, our pistols ready. We make our way through small, unfenced gardens, across the village street unseen, and follow the park wall into the woods, where we stretch out next to a pond covered with magnificent water lilies. We are now aware of the improbability of our luck, but also of the carelessness of our conduct during the entire war. Unusual situations demand unusual decisions. As we discuss whether or not to test our lucky streak by knocking on the Madame's door during the day, since it appears that the entire village is in Soissons celebrating the victory, our doom approaches in the figure of a stone-faced old Frenchman. He bends around the shrubs in front of the pond and begins quietly picking the water lilies, without even glancing around the area. Unable to move because the old man would notice us, we wait, hoping he will soon disappear as quietly as he arrived. But suddenly he slips on the slick bank, falls onto his back, grabs the grass with his hands and stares directly at us. "Oh, Soldat Allemand!" he screams as if he is insane, and with his last ounce of strength slides back away from the water's edge. He stares at us with an open mouth and immediately screams in a shrill, crackling voice, "La guerre finie, American soldat ici, liberté française, soldat allemand part, shut your damn mouth," Brilla screams, going straight toward him and seizing him in his arms. Irresolutely we stand around the old-timer who, shaking with fear, begins to scream again. "What shall we do with the old boy?" Brilla asks, puzzled. "Stick his head under the water until he becomes peaceful," Hocker says, reaching into the man's pockets and pulling out matches in his hand. Quickly we light our cigarettes. As fast as his legs will carry him, the grandpa uses this instant to gallop back toward the village, screaming all the way. We follow him quickly and grab him by his jacket. He stops running, and whimpering, he moans, "Qu'est la guerre?" "Yes, this is war, old man," Hocker hisses at him. Undecided as to what we should do with this shaggy Frenchman, fate takes the unpleasant task out of our hands. 5 Frenchmen come toward us on a fast run, their attention having been drawn to us by the old man's screams. The 5 men hold their rifles to our breasts. "Give up," one of them calls to us in good German. "The Americans have been in Laon for some time." Slowly we lower our pistols. The spokesman approaches us calmly. With outstretched hand, he demands our weapons. Instead, we put the pistols back into our holsters. "We are not at war with France," I say, looking him in the eyes. Laughing, he pulls a pack of American cigarettes out of his pants pocket and places one between his lips in typical French style. "You are lucky," he says, still laughing, and lights his cigarette with a burning match. "I was a prisoner in Germany," he begins in a calm voice, "and I cannot complain about the treatment. You could have easily fallen into the hands of some fanatics who would have shot you without mercy. You can keep your weapons if you will follow me into the village, where I will turn you over to the Americans. You are certainly part of the people who rested here a few days ago and did not cause any trouble. Give up. The war is over for you, and you will see your homeland again." We look at each other. "We will not surrender to the French," I whisper to my friends, and notice that one of the riflemen has disappeared back toward the village. "Let's run into the underbrush on the left and shoot it out with these guys," Hocker murmurs through his teeth. An unrealistic situation rushes through my consciousness, and I am in doubt whether I am awake or dreaming. Unexpectedly, 4 Americans, the size of trees, appear from around the corner. Shaking with fear and excitement, they remain about 5 yards distant from us, standing with their automatic pistols pointed at us. "Hands up, boys!" one of them calls, and as in a vision, I see everything that is dear and precious to me disappearing into an unending distance. The most disgraceful moment of my long life as a soldier has arrived. Here in this lousy French pen, it has come to an unworthy conclusion. "Raise your paws in a double German salute, Helmut," Brilla says loudly next to me. Just now I notice that my friends are holding their open hands in front of their chests. Without direction from my absent spirit, I slowly raise my hands toward the sky.